for you, and I really want to focus on quality as it relates to well-being within an organization, and specifically how it relates to the psychological safety within an organization, and it can be a practice management tool for you. So it's kind of theoretical, and I know that we need to get to practical, and I would love to have whatever conversation we can today, and or conversations following this. I'll ask that I may remember it from time to time, but I'll ask Linda or any of the other facilitators to help me with questions that may come up specific to what I may be talking about. But again, this is really about my experience and bringing together some theories that I've come across in my work in HR, and how I feel like I've been able to help set up organizations to be in a space that acknowledges how to grow and how to be accepting and be in that curious state. So I called this talk How You Do Anything, based in part on the book by Suzanne Evans, called How You Do Anything is How You Do Everything. And that's probably a thought that many of you have heard before, or a sentiment you've expressed yourselves. And so I subscribe to it. And if there's something that I'd like you to keep in mind, another way to put it is, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing well. I think it's attributed to John Wooden, which is, if you don't have time to do it right, what makes you think you have time to do it twice? So all of these things kind of coming together in my mind about quality as it relates to your position within an organization are really where I'm coming from today. So with that, let me jump in here. And again, I want to just say that, so I want to make sure you can see this. It's Cultural Quotient. So I did a little bit of research, and this is actually a group called Cultural Quotient. And this quote is up here. CQ is the measurement of the spoken and unspoken behaviors and norms of an organization, a deep dive into its organizational ethos. So many of us talk about culture. I know it's a big deal. HR, it's a constant topic of thought work, especially, and as well as other work. More specifically today, though, I want to talk about some things as it relates to quality and psychological safety. The first being documented policies and practices. So when I think about an organization, these are the things that you could pick up at any time. And some organizations do this differently than others, do it better than others. Having worked in both healthcare and now in a public service agency, compliance is a big deal. And compliance can seem really dry, but at the same time, these documented policies and practices often become artifacts, if you will, of the organization. So how we behave, what we espouse, and what we've documented as what we believe is important is captured, at least in large part, in these documented policies and practices. And then we have the sum of shared ideas and collective memory. So this one right here is really interesting to me, because what it talks about for me is the difference between, and this is what I call the delta between the two. So if you have an organization where you have documented policies and practices, and then you have, as I think it's Peter Drucker had said, he's a thought leader in HR and culture, says, culture eats strategy for breakfast. This is how we really do things around here. The delta, the difference between how different those two things look, is something that I believe presents a question about the psychological safety within your organization. So there's a difference between safety and comfort. And there's an incredible time within Minneapolis, as we all know recently, the death of George Floyd and all the activity in the last summer and continuing on, and around the country. And in many ways, when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it becomes this very challenging thing to talk about when we have such acute and terrible outcomes that are occurring around us. And at the same time, in recent times, we become to talk about an enormous amount of change in how we perceive safety. So when it comes to DEI work in particular, having difficult conversations, particularly when it comes to issues that have come up, that's where people shut down. And Linda put it, the Minnesota Nice, the reserved, I'll be honest, I'm from Detroit, Michigan. We do not have Minnesota Nice in Detroit. If I don't like something you did, I'm probably just going to tell you. And it doesn't mean we can't talk about it and be friends and be done with it, but I'm going to say it. So having moved to Minnesota, even at a very young age, it is still something that I often get called out about my radical candor. And so it's something that I have had to learn to navigate. So, our expectation though recently within organizations in particular, and this, we could talk all day about, cancel culture and Me Too movement and Black Lives Matter and many, many, many other aspects where you've seen people who have either in celebrity or in other cases have been removed from their places of power and or authority based on some of the outcomes. And so the expectation is that there's been a more recent aspect of becoming synonymous safety and comfort. And I was doing some research, and Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff, who are out of NYU in their psychology, and I'm going to read this quote because it was really important to me. Culture that allows the concept of safety to creep so far that it equates emotional discomfort with physical danger is a culture that encourages people to systematically protect one another from the very experiences in everyday life that they need in order to become strong and healthy. So when I think about psychological safety within my organization, I'm thinking about resilience. I'm thinking about the ability to withstand and sustain ourselves through challenging times and do it together. So part of what we're talking about is that. And so, there's safety, there's comfort, and I'm here to tell you that these things are not equal. They're not necessarily equal. Okay, I want you safe, but your ideological comfort is not necessarily where I'm focused, because I want you ideologically strong. I want you to think about your views, hold them, be able to debate them, and so forth. And so a lot of what I see within the work that we do stems from that. So how to engage. If you have not heard of him, Daniel Pink is a thought leader in the HR space. And with regard to employee engagement, he talks about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And he describes them, as my characterization, really more as a three-legged stool, if you will, about when you have these things working in combination, when every employee feels autonomy in their work, mastery of their work, and purpose in their work, then you have created a fully engaged workforce and an engaged individual. And so any one of those things coming out of balance causes static, causes a disengagement of sorts. So then as I talked about earlier, you have this CQ delta, this place where what you say you're going to do versus how you behave in practice have a gap and have a disparity. And those things in the organization, when you measure them together, it's my belief that you really then can do an assessment about your psychological safety readiness. And psychological safety and readiness is important for things like change management, DEI, but also in general, just the state of your workforce. How are people feeling when they come to work every day? How ready are they to take on the big challenges of your organization? All of that is built into that disparate nature, or that delta, as I've described it. So I'm going to touch a little bit on mastery. So two of the three, mastery and purpose specifically, as it relates to this cultural quotient, or CQ, and psychological safety. So as I said, you have a large delta in your CQ. It means a couple of things. Number one is you have stress within your organization. So whether or not people can acknowledge it and whether or not they understand it, if there's a lack of understanding about what comes next, or something that can only be understood situationally, when things change, what is this going to mean for me? These are the questions that arise when people have a large CQ delta. When there's a big difference between here's what we say we're going to do and here's how we're actually going to behave, or here's how we behave every day, it is something then where people will always be in a state of wondering what's next. The next shoe is always ready to drop, okay? So that's the stress is one piece, and we all know how harmful stress is, obviously. The other piece is this inefficiency, and this is the recovering operational leader in me coming out a little bit too. And that is to say, look, having regular static or filter or a lens that you have to look through to get to the meaning and to get to what you're doing within your organization means that you will always have people wondering what the true motivations are and what's coming next. So it doesn't allow your teams to focus. They burn out faster. They have less overall trust in you and your messaging as either a leader in your organization or a representative. And put another way, as a musician, so I know Linda put in the, I think in my introduction that I'm a founding member of Contus, and I was really fortunate to be a musician for a long time. And music in many ways is about how you deal with creating dissonance and then resolution. So when you think about a dissonant chord, that's when the chord kind of crunches together and then it resolves. That's a feeling that everybody has. And whether or not you're a musician by trade or by hobby or anything like that, it's a feeling that almost everyone can relate to. So imagine, if you will, you're in a place where you have a high cultural quotient delta. Every day is like that when you have that large delta. So you're always living in a state of dissonance where you're waiting for it to get better, you're waiting for that resolution, and it doesn't really ever come. Or maybe it comes, but it's not there very long, and then suddenly you're back to the dissonance. And so when it doesn't come for a long period of time, or it's a very short-lived resolution that you may have, any person has two choices. One, you can become comfortable with the dissonance. So we can live in some discomfort. And this goes, having again worked in healthcare, not a clinician, but having seen people in chronic pain, as well as being an HR practitioner, I think we can all relate to the aspect of change management that's difficult when someone will say, boy, I really wish we could do something about that. And then someone brings an idea about changing it, and everyone's like, I don't know. I don't know, because the familiar is what we cling to. And even if we're familiar with the discomfort and the pain, if it's not acute enough, we will sustain it and we will remain in it. Okay. And the other thing is that it's really against our wiring to want to be in that distance. So you may never actually love it, but you'll find discomfort in it. If you ever known a person who has a headache, yourself maybe, if you're a migraine sufferer, you know that person is on the edge and how easy it is for them to snap. Well, imagine that subversive and frankly pernicious kind of feeling living in your organization through these deltas and these big changes, and how people then are always on edge to some degree. Okay, that's what I feel, and that's what I found. The other option that a person can have when this happens is they change the channel. They change the station, right? So if you don't like the song that's playing, oftentimes you change the radio station. Well, what does that mean within an organization? It typically means one of two things. One is you have good people leaving the organization, which is certainly what we don't want. And then if they're not leaving the organization, they're tuning out to what you're saying, which is also what you don't want, because the message that we have and that we're trying to share with them is one that we believe is important. Otherwise, we wouldn't be saying it. And if people are tuned out, you're missing that opportunity. Okay. So now I want to move to purpose. So with regard to purpose, another strong thought leader who is very prevalent these days, and rightfully so, Simon Sinek, and he wrote a book called Start With Why. So he talks about, if you understand the why, it helps people come along to clarity about what they're doing within an organization, and it helps them engage. Okay. So within mission-driven organizations, I've been fortunate to work in nonprofits my whole career, and having that mission behind what I'm doing has helped me through some difficult times, and I think all of us could probably say that. And it gives you purpose. It gives you purpose. So within an organization, that purpose is important. So the goals that we may have in an organization, so the goals are the work plans that we want to have to achieve the goals. In most cases, the successful organization is one that is able to align the goals that they have and the actions they want to take to achieve them back to the why. So, and then they let people understand for themselves through line of sight to the how. Okay, so when it comes to my organizations that I've been a part of, when I sit down with the organization and I put together, for example, an annual plan or even an annual incentive plan, the goals that we build are about taking the strategic objectives of the organization and saying, okay, if I'm a frontline worker who works every day at just the leading edge of our organization, how can I see myself in the work that we're doing with this goal? Because that then becomes the work of that leader to help them do that. So being able to ask why is really important. And policies and practices, as I said a little bit earlier, are probably some of our most prevalent artifacts that we have available to us. They're embedded in what we do. People know, if you have an SOP or you have policies that are written, why do we do this? And why do we take the steps that we do? these are prevalent and they're out there. So examining them, for example, is a fantastic way for an organization to sort of understand or get at least a baseline for themselves about where that delta may sit. Okay, being able to ask why is important. The low hanging fruit, if you have this opportunity, would be that if you have any documents, policies, or practices out there, and you look at them and you start to ask why we do this, and the answer is anything that resembles the answer because we've always done it that way, that's a great place to start. Okay, because then you allow people to say, look, there is nothing that is off limits for us to evaluate with regard to how we can be better. And these longstanding policies we may have deserve to be evaluated because they are supposed to represent a document that relates to why we think things are important, why we're doing what we're doing. Okay, so from there, you build this freedom for people to ask why. I saw just a little bit in the chat, a person coming in, and I don't recall who it was exactly, but they were talked about how for them, it was about being able to remain curious. If you have the ability to remain curious in your organization, the freedom that provides every person in the organization to live in that psychologically safe space to ask why, without it feeling as though there's going to be some sort of backlash on them about it, will free you then to become better as an organization, and it will allow people to fully engage. And that engagement, again, helps to build the resiliency. So I'm hoping you can see, even though we're not talking specifically about it, when you go back to DEI and you want to have a difficult conversation, if you've got an environment where you can say, look, we have now demonstrated and we have this practice with ourselves where we understand that asking why is a good thing and wanting to remain curious. Similarly, when you get into that space of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, as I've started to talk about it at the Public Housing Authority, I've talked about the compassion that we need to have and the empathy are stemming from that curiosity that we want to have with one another. But the ability to have that says, look, we don't have any presuppositions about why someone's asking the question. Their curiosity is a gift to me, and it offers me an opportunity to further educate them and help them become better understanding of the things that we demonstrate as diverse, visible or otherwise. So, one of the things that I thought about was your policies and your practices are a physical mantra that the organization can use. So if you demonstrate something and you do it every day the same way, and you show that, then you've demonstrated to one degree or another what's important to you. And so if you're missing steps, if you're cutting out steps, take the step out. But don't be afraid to ask the question, why are we doing it like this? Why are we doing it like this? And to empower others to ask that same question. I always talk to my teams in HR, again, a recovering operations kind of wonk here. It's my INT, the J that comes out. I'm always wondering about how we do it better in process improvement. Process breeds excellence. So I would say to my teams, look, if we do it exactly the same way, then the places where it seems strange or it seems out of alignment, it's far easier for us to look at it together and figure out how to fix it, how to make it better, how to do it better. But if we pick it up every single time and we're like, let's fabricate this from the beginning, we're in trouble. So process breeds excellence. And Jim Peters is a friend of mine, and he is I call him a guru of sorts around process improvement. And Linda mentioned this a little bit earlier about the firefighting versus fire marshal. I just want to call out that I can't take credit for that. He shared this with me. He comes from a long line of firefighters in his family, his father, I believe, and uncles, and maybe even some of his siblings. And he said, rightfully, my uncles and my dad were all firefighters, and they would be called heroes, rightfully. And he said, but to a person, every single one of them would tell you that the true hero is the fire marshal who never lets it happen, So, I say this to you because these things are all functioning together. And it's this, and again, the three-legged stool of how these ideas interact with one another. I say to my team often, don't let the pitch go by. If there's something that you can look at to improve it, yeah, you want to stem whatever tide you need to keep your operation running, but ask the why. Ask, why did that happen? What could we do about it? Could it help us to be better? It helps people to stay engaged. Now, I want to close with a couple of what I understand. So often there's pitfalls in this. The first one's pride of ownership. So there's no getting around it. Within an organization, if somebody's been responsible for a process, document, a policy, they have a vested interest in it, and at least in part, it defines them. And in their minds, at least, may define, at least in part, their value within the organization. So one of the ways that we create a solution around how to move past that potential pitfall is to honor, acknowledge, and engage. So I want to honor that person's contribution. I want to acknowledge that they have brought us to the good place we're at. And then I do those things typically publicly, and then I engage them. They become the champion for how we get to even better, right? Cultural holdouts, these are the folks that are sometimes the most challenging. And this is the one where it's probably the most HR related, which is, there will always be cultural holdouts. Those people who believe that the choice they're making, because it's been offered to them before, potentially is, am I going to adopt that change or am I not going to? This looks similar in some ways to, you have to engage those individuals to get their buy-in, but the cultural holdout, the change will be not whether or not we're going to go from A to B, but are we going to go from A to B by path 1 or path 2? And that change happens, often at a challenging point, and there's some inflection there, and frankly, some confrontation. Many people would say, look, how do you engage, and how does someone feel psychologically safe if there's this confrontation? Well, here's what I would offer to that, which is, if I have 10 people on a team and I have one person who was allowed to essentially create or maintain that large delta of that CQ, I can either help with that one person and try to help them understand the real decision that they need to be making, or I can allow, again, that noise and dissonance to sit in the other 9 people. And so I've either maintain and manage the overall environment as best I can, or I spend time on that one individual. And I would offer, as challenging as it is, that it's really nothing personal. It's an objective approach to it, which is, look, we're clear about what we're trying to do. Everyone understands the ramifications, and I want to offer you a true choice about how you want to be part of this. And the final thing I want to acknowledge here is fatigue. This is hard work, and it's always going on, and you'll never be done with it. And it seems like we're trying to eat the elephant all at one time. But I would tell you this from the perspective that if you start small, these become additive things, because really, in my experience, what you're trying to approach and accomplish here is not simply that you're attacking one problem or one issue, but that you're creating a new way of thinking that allows for an environment for that psychological safety and to be safe in that space. Because that environment is one that allows you then to branch off, have difficult conversations, dig into things that are difficult and challenging. And again, as I said, the stress and overall management of the stress of the team is lower. And there's lots of information from an HR perspective about, low stress, high engagement equals good outcomes for any organization. But from a health and well-being standpoint, it really is about that psychological safety and that stress management, and helping people to build that resilience as a jumping off point to any of the other aspects of the conversation or the work that you want to do. So I've gone far over time. I do want to pause and see if there's any burning questions that the moderators would like me to address. Otherwise, again, I'll certainly be reading them, be putting something out. I know we want to get to some of the small group activities, so I'll stop there and just offer thanks for listening to me today. So.
All right, are there any burning questions?
I have a question. My name is Christy. I was just wondering what DEI certification you got. How did you choose that one? I know there's a lot out there, so any insight is helpful.
So when you say certification, what do you mean?
Well, I know there's like a lot of programs, and I was looking online for some, and they, some you have to pay for, some are like free online courses and whatever. So I guess what did you do and why?
Yeah, so my experience is really based in in experiential, so I don't have a specific certification. My master's is in labor relations and employee and industrial relations and HR management. I've done a lot of work over the years, though, with regard to inclusion, and frankly, going all the way back to, my days in Cantus. One of the things, part of our mission and our vision was, we believe that it was important for people of all ages and of every stripe to be singing, and the importance of music in their lives. So really, it's about an approach that, for you, that if you're going to go down a path of certification or a program of sorts, I would offer that you still need to take a position in your own mind about how you're approaching it, because diversity, equity, and inclusion, each one of those also has its own flavor, if you will. So I try to approach my work from an inclusion standpoint, such that I believe that then diversity and equity fall under that umbrella. So if I'm inclusive of everyone, then I go further and I acknowledge the different aspects of diversity, and then equity. What does that mean? Am I ensuring that everyone has equity in that? But again, I don't believe there's a right or wrong way to do it, in my mind. So it would really be about finding your own kind of internal narrative, if you will, about what that means, and then approaching a program from there with regard to its focus would be my suggestion.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Great.
absolutely.
I will